Imagine a night so powerful that it altered the course of history forever. Two mighty empires, each at the height of their power, clashed under the cover of darkness. The fate of entire civilizations hung in the balance as warriors, leaders, and entire societies collided in a single, unforgettable moment. What caused this incredible conflict, and what happened when two empires collided in one fateful night? In the vast tapestry of history, few stories are as dramatic and impactful as the clash between two empires at their peak. The moment we were talking about D&T just involved armies marching into battle. It was the culmination of years of tension, ambition, and unmatched power. To understand the true magnitude of this night, we must first take a closer look at the two empires that were on the verge of an epic collision. The first empire, the Roman Empire, was the most powerful political and military force in the Mediterranean world. By the time of the Great Clash, the Romans had conquered vast territories, stretching from the northern reaches of Britain to the deserts of Egypt. Their mighty legions, disciplined and battle-hardened, were seen as unstoppable by their enemies. But power can often breed arrogance, and the Romans had expanded so far that their empire was stretched thin. Internal divisions and leadership struggles were already beginning to show cracks in the once unbreakable facade. Meanwhile, across the eastern horizon, the Persian Empire, led by the Sassanid dynasty, had grown into a formidable rival. The Sassanids ruled a vast territory stretching from the Iranian plateau to Mesopotamia, boasting a military that rivaled the Romans in both size and skill. Under the leadership of their brilliant king Khosrow II, the Persians were determined to reclaim their former glory. Khosrow's vision was to revive the mighty Persian Empire to its former grandeur, pushing the boundaries of Persian influence back into Roman-held lands. With a keen strategic mind and a desire to restore Persian honor, Khosrow set his sights on a historic confrontation with the Romans. Tensions between the two empires had been brewing for years, with both sides sparring over control of vital land and resources. The Romans and Persians had fought many battles in the past, but neither side had emerged with a clear victory. However, both empires had their own reasons for wanting to claim dominance. For the Romans, maintaining control over the western part of the world was essential for their continued survival. For the Persians, it was more than just expansion. It was about vengeance and reclaiming what they believed was rightfully theirs. What made this conflict even more intense was the mutual distrust between the two empires. The Romans had been responsible for numerous invasions and setbacks to the Persians over the years. On the other hand, the Persians viewed the Romans as an ever-present threat to their eastern territories. They knew that if they didn't act soon, the Romans would. The date was set. It was a night like no other, dark, mysterious, and charged with tension. Both empires were poised at the edges of history, their armies ready to face off in an epic battle that would determine the future of the known world. On one side, the Roman legions stood under the command of Emperor Heraclius, a seasoned military leader who had ascended to power during one of Rome's most difficult times. On the other side, the Persians were ready for battle under the leadership of Khosrow II, the brilliant and vengeful king who had long sought retribution for the defeats his empire had suffered at Roman hands. The stage was set in Ctesiphon, the capital of the Persian Empire, where the two armies would meet in a final showdown. The Romans, desperate to reclaim lost territory and defend their eastern borders, had marched their troops deep into Persian lands. Meanwhile, the Persians, eager to assert their dominance and restore their empire's honor, had been preparing for this confrontation for months. As night began to fall over the battlefield, the armies of both empires stood at the ready. The Romans, known for their highly disciplined formations, stood in tight ranks with their shields and spears, prepared for the worst. The Persian army, equally formidable, was known for its cavalry, which was a feared force on the battlefield. The Persian horsemen were swift and deadly, a key element that could easily turn the tide of battle in their favor. The battle was already a war of nerves, with each side aware that the other was determined to dominate the battlefield. As the first sounds of battle echoed through the air, it became clear that this was no ordinary fight. Heraclius had been preparing for a long and difficult campaign, but he knew that in this battle, everything was on the line. His armies were exhausted after a long trek, but the Roman emperor had one advantage: his deep knowledge of strategy. Khosrow II, on the other hand, was determined not to let this battle slip through his fingers. His forces were well rested and ready to take on the might of the Roman Empire. The battle quickly turned into a violent, chaotic clash of shields, swords, and relentless fury. The battle began under the cover of darkness, but as the night wore on, the violence escalated. The Persians, relying heavily on their cavalry, used their speed and mobility to strike deep into Roman lines. The Romans, on the other hand, held their ground, using their disciplined formations to push back the Persian cavalry. The two armies clashed in a deadly game of cat and mouse, each side trying to gain the upper hand. With each passing hour, the tension grew. Every swing of the sword, every clash of shields, carried with it the fate of empires. As the night deepened, the battle reached its climax. The final hours of the clash were marked by both sides pushing for a decisive victory. Heraclius knew that if he did not act soon, the Persian forces would break through his lines, and the Roman Empire would lose its grip on the eastern frontier. But Khosrow too was desperate. The outcome of this battle would determine whether his empire would rise to its former glory or be crushed by Roman might. In the final moments of the night, as both armies were exhausted from hours of brutal combat, a strange twist of fate occurred. The Roman army, unable to hold back the relentless Persian cavalry, seemed on the verge of retreat. But in a last-ditch effort, Heraclius ordered a bold counterattack, rallying his troops and pushing forward in one final, all-out offensive. The Roman legions, their morale lifted by their emperor's command, struck back with ferocity, turning the tide of battle. But just as the Romans began to gain the upper hand, the Persian forces launched a desperate final assault. The sound of clashing steel, cries of soldiers, and the thunderous hooves of the Persian cavalry filled the air, signaling that this night would be remembered for centuries to come. As the first light of dawn began to break over the battlefield, the once proud armies of both empires lay battered and broken. The land was scattered with the fallen soldiers from both sides, who had given their all in a night that would forever be etched in history. The sounds of battle had faded into a haunting silence, but the consequences of what had just occurred would resonate for centuries. The aftermath of this historic clash wasn't just about the number of soldiers who had fallen, or the land that had been lost or gained. It was a turning point in the larger struggle between two mighty empires, each with their own vision for the future. But who truly emerged victorious from the chaos? The Roman Empire, under the leadership of Emperor Heraclius, managed to hold its ground against the Persians, despite the overwhelming odds. The Romans, though exhausted and battered, found new strength in their desperate counterattack. Heraclius' ability to rally his troops in the final moments of battle and his strategic brilliance allowed him to preserve the Roman position. The Persians, despite their initial advantage and relentless attacks, were forced to retreat. However, the victory came at a heavy cost. Heraclius had lost many of his finest soldiers, and the Roman Empire had been pushed to its limits. For the Persian Empire, the battle was a bittersweet defeat. While they had initially gained the upper hand, the Persians were unable to deliver the decisive blow they had hoped for. Khosrow II's forces were forced to pull back, their dreams of restoring Persian dominance to the region shattered. The losses were staggering on both sides, but the Persian retreat meant that the Romans had, at least for the time being, managed to maintain control over their eastern provinces. Khosrow's ambitions of total victory had been dashed, and the Persian Empire was left in a state of disarray. But perhaps the true cost of this clash wasn't just in the number of soldiers who died. The event symbolized the fragility of empires, no matter how powerful they seemed. Both the Romans and the Persians were left to contend with the weight of the destruction they had caused. The toll of war was not just measured in the lives lost, but in the lasting effects on the psyche of both civilizations. Leaders and generals from both sides would forever remember this night as a turning point, a moment where the dreams of empire and glory were met with the harsh realities of warfare. For Heraclius, the victory was hollow. While he had preserved the Roman Empire, it was clear that the empire could not continue to stretch its resources thin. The Roman Empire was weakened, and the future was uncertain. The loss of so many soldiers and the exhaustion of his forces left the Roman emperor with little room to breathe. Heraclius' strategic victory in this battle did not erase the looming problems of the empire divisions, internal strife, and the need to recover from the brutal campaign. It was a victory won at a cost that could not be ignored. For Khosrow II, the loss was deeply personal. His ambitions of Persian glory were halted, and his army returned home defeated. The Persian king's dreams of vengeance and empire expansion were shattered, and his forces limped back to rebuild. However, Khosrow's resolve would not be broken. Though defeated in this battle, his vision of a stronger Persian Empire remained intact. The wounds of this night would take time to heal, but the Persian king would not rest until this battle forever changed the course of history. But it's just the beginning of the untold stories waiting for you. If you're fascinated by this monumental clash of empires, hit the subscribe button now and join us on this epic journey through history. Don't miss out on more stories like this, where power, strategy, and ambition collide in unimaginable ways. Ready to uncover the mysteries of the past? Let's dive deeper. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of history in the making.